have a roll call.
Mr. Annunziata,
Here.
Mr. Sinaglia,
Here.
Mrs. Coughlin.
Here.
Here. Mrs.
Here.
Mishra,
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Here.
Ms. Pellet,
Here.
Mr. Sweeney,
Here.
Mr. Zimmerman.
Here.
Thank you. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we please have a reading of the meeting notice?
The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with provisions of the Act, Vernon Township Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published, and adequate notice has been provided, and notice of this meeting has been properly posted in accordance with the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law.
Thank you. It's recommended that the board enter closed session for purposes of discussing legal and student matters. Can I have a motion to enter closed?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Zimmerman, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Donnell. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the board is in closed. We're going to go down to
We're good? Is Ms. Coughlin on as well? Okay. We should give her a second to join this Zoom link. Okay, and are we, we're all linked up to YouTube? All right. It's recommended that the board return to public session. Can I have a motion?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Sweeney, a second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Lutner. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the board is in open session. Item D is public participation, limited to items on the work session agenda and any student comments. We did not receive any emailed public comments before the meeting. First, we'll begin with those members of the public who are here in person, and then we'll go over to those who are attending via Zoom. If you are a member of the public and would like to comment, you'll have 5 minutes. Please step up to the podium and state your name and part of town.
Speak with or without the mask?
We can hear you
We
with the
can hear
mask.
you.
Okay, my name is Bill Higgins, live in Glenwood section of Vernon, and a former member of the board. I
Welcome.
served 6 years with you, went through the budget process multiple times. That's the main point of my being here. I just want to say that doing those, I didn't think I got much done as a conservative, fiscal conservative. But apparently I did, because the money that you're banking, the cap money that you're taking back 5, 6 years later, were monies that I take pride in having saved. And in one case, we actually went and gave money back to the taxpayers. Another case, and 4 other cases, we were under cap. So you're now retroactively, legally within the state of New Jersey, but not legally within the private industry, taking back money that was already earmarked for the taxpayers. It's the law, you're allowed to do it, but I just don't think it's right. Furthermore, when a board member, there's a lot of new members here, within the last year, you really don't have an idea of all the words and phrases and what takes place, like banking the cap. You may understand that, but the other thing that's taking place is that you're taking the plans are to take $5.7 million of taxpayer money that was saved during COVID and going forward during COVID, and for over budgeting on certain items on your budget that belongs to the taxpayers. And I find that to be just wrong. You're planning on a 3.03% increase in taxes for the taxpayers, while you're holding on to $5.7 million that you're saving because the state's taking away more money in the next 2 years. Justin made a good statement last meeting on the 18th, and you asked a question, rhetorical question. Are the members of the board okay conceptually with withholding the funds? One person answered the question, Mr. Sweeney, affirmative, that you were okay with that concept. No one else answered. I'm not even sure if they understood by taking money and putting it in a capital reserve when you're not going to be building buildings is just a way of parking the money on the side instead of taking more attention to your budget and saving some money. Going to the budget, there's one number that stands out. Seemed to be a tactic that was taken by the former BA. We always came in high on healthcare costs. The budget now is for $1 million increase on healthcare costs. As we got closer to the actual budget date, that over budgeting was always reduced. So right now, you're showing an increase of $995,000. It's not going to be $995,000. You're putting it in the budget. I would implore that somebody takes a closer look at that because it's not going to be that high. Furthermore, there were suggestions made over the years to the former BA on how to save money. Go out to bid for insurance services. The board agreed to it, never did it. You've got Norval Agency, and now you have Brown & Brown as your healthcare insurer. And the person who was your former healthcare insurer sold their business to Brown & Brown, and now they're the person assigned to your account. There's no competitive bidding. It's just go out and keep the current providers. We know there's savings when you go out to bid. You're putting in a new field at the high school. No bidding on that. You went to the Middlesex County Co-op. I don't even think you're a member of the co-op. You're a member of the Morris County Co-op. And then the other question would be, did you have an architect look at the plans for the new field? Because if something goes wrong, you've got nothing to go back on, no one to say that they were part of this process. Once again, it was using a vendor that previously put the old field in. Didn't go out to bid. I don't understand it. Running a business, you would do those things. You're not running the business as a business. Lastly, I noticed on the agenda, we had 5,500 students here in this district in 1997. The projection from the agency that we hired was to go to 2,960. At the end of that period of time, which was 2 years ago, he was within 3 students of his projection. You hired him again 2 years ago to project again where it's going. 2,560 is the new number. Not counting the 35 students that are out of district, you're down to 2,880. You're going right exactly where he said you're going to go, in spite of the people for the last 10 years saying there's all kinds of movement, people moving into town, houses being sold. The population is going down, the number of students is going down, and somebody has to realize it. You can't just keep budgeting as if these things aren't happening. And I don't want to make this a personal statement, but you just hired a new business administrator for the same amount of money that previous administrator was making. There was no breakage, and we've done that once before. A principal of a middle school was hired at a salary much higher than the other principals, and now that principal, with pay raises, is in the top 3 earnings in the whole district. And now we've created that situation again. I noticed you hired a new special service administrator at a lower rate than the previous one. And this person, if they're good, will climb up the ladder, will get rewarded for doing a good job. But when you start at the top, where are you going? Where's the savings? I don't think you'd do it if it was your company. So those are some of the general statements that I saw from reading the budget, listening to your meetings. And I hope maybe in the next 2 weeks, when you vote on the budget, that some of these things will change your mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who are here in person that would like to comment at this time?
I know there were just a lot of things covered that were not on the agenda. I was going to wait, and I guess I will wait till the end. I do want to,
I'm sorry, could you state your name?
I'm sorry, Stephen Dunlop, I'm sorry. Edwina Pisac, retiring, leaving the district. I'm very sorry to hear it. She's been a great principal. We've known her for a long time, and she's been a real asset to the district. So I'm sad to see her leaving, but I'm sure she is much due for the reward of retirement. You have on your agenda tonight to bring back the daycare. And I thought that's what Bill was going to speak on at the first session. He knows more about this than I do, but I know that we went down this road once before. I know there was at one point that there was reduced fare to teachers. I think the biggest issue is it really affects our local businesses. You're taking students away from companies that are already suffering through the COVID pandemic. And I think when we start setting up a pre-K to compete with local businesses, it's wrong. And I think you guys should give this a lot of thought before you do it. This has come up 2 times before, and in the end, it didn't move forward. It seems like we're always going in circles with this board as new members come on. We go back to what we had done before. Just like I will bring this up, there was an issue raised at the last meeting by the head of the liaison committee about giving the dog park in the community garden for a nominal fee to the town. We went through this 3 years ago, and it was agreed that it wasn't an asset that should be given away. If we don't need it, we should sell it. I've talked to several board members over the last few weeks, and I know that there may not be a lot realized from it, and so it may not make a lot of sense to sell it. But we just got to stop giving stuff away that doesn't belong to us. It belongs to taxpayers. And I just hate to see this board making the same, not the same mistakes, but going down the same paths that we've gone down before. And in the end, they realized it was an error, and they abandoned the idea. But here we are once again on the agenda to set up the pre-K here at Walnut Ridge. And I think there's enough daycares in this town that will suffer because of it. And I don't think we should be competing with local businesses. And I'll save my other comments to the end. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to clarify on one point. I believe you were referring to conversations that we've had in the past at the board table about establishing a daycare program that was 2 or 3 years ago. The item you're seeing on the agenda tonight is not about that. It's about relocating our existing preschool program, which is in a different building, back into this building. So it wouldn't be about establishing a new program. And this program, I can't speak to it with the eloquence that perhaps Ms. Coughlin or one of our administrators could, but it is mandated by law that we have a preschool program for our special education students, and we have to have a certain number of general education students in the program as well. So that is not the daycare that was looked at being established a few years ago. Just wanted to clarify that.
I just wanted to clarify in the field, it was my understanding that we did have other companies look at the field, correct?
Yes.
And it was my understanding also that we did have somebody look at it for drainage, things like that, correct?
Not when I was here, but I believe prior.
Yeah, I just want to set the record straight on that we didn't just go with just one company.
We had three companies come and give us prices. The company that we agreed to go with is the lowest price, and also it's the company that put in the field in the first place. So that's just the correct information that we have.
And regarding the dog park and community garden property, I just want to point out that the discussion, which is not, was to transfer it to the town, which would still be the taxpayers. It's not, we're not giving it away to anybody other than taxpayers. And we're not doing it anyway, but it was just a discussion. So I think that was a mischaracterization to suggest that we're just giving away taxpayers' money or property. That wasn't, the town is still Vernon. We're not giving it to some private entity.
Yeah, so very briefly, because you have time remaining from your 5 minutes.
It was mentioned at the last board meeting and was said that the mayor had no interest in taking it back. The previous board was going to sell that property. Several of the board members are gone. It's a new board. I don't even know half the people that are here. But I was told that the chairman of the liaison committee advised Ed DeYoung, and I'll quote, "I can get this done." A committee is to research, investigate, and report back to the board. The board makes the decisions, not the committees. And I think it's very bad when you have a committee chairman telling people that they can get things done on behalf of the board. And I think you board president needs to be very aware of this and needs to let all the committee chairmen know that they're not in a position to agree to do anything. They gather facts, they bring it back to the board. The board's the one that makes the decision.
I
As
certainly
the
hope
committee
that-
chairperson, I can say that I don't believe that's an accurate characterization of what I said. I did say we were interested in discussing it. That I definitely did say, because
I believe it was, and if the president would like to reach out to Ed DeYoung, I think Ed DeYoung can clarify it.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
I would hope, though, that as chairman of any committee, that we would never make any warranties to any member of the public that, we could get something done. That's inappropriate. And, I'd like to make sure that that was not said, because that is, no member at this table has any more power than any other member. And it wouldn't be one member's decision to sell the dog park. We have no intention of selling the dog park. I have seen that on social media, unfortunately. And in order to sell the dog park, we would have to section off and do engineering on the property so that we could go ahead and have our solar panels. That is at a very large cost. So I don't understand where this came from. I've spoken to several individuals that feel the need to go on social media and say that. I told those individuals that is not true. So we have no intention of doing that. We would have to subdivide the property, and we have not investigated that at all.
Yeah, so
I mean, it's not cost effective.
Yeah,
And it's in wetlands. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. So please understand that that's not the case.
No, and I just want to clarify for the record as a final comment on this before returning to public comments, that the board very openly and transparently last year voted to send a letter to the mayor's office to see if the township was interested in taking on the ownership. They're already the ones leasing the land from us. They lease it, they maintain it, and they sublease it to a entity that runs these community organizations. The board at a public meeting voted to send a letter to the mayor's office to determine if there was any interest in pursuing that. So there has been, public conversation about this for a number of months now. It's been a transparent process. There hasn't been any attempt to hide or do anything of that nature. So I just want to clarify that point.
There was a 1-year lease given.
Correct.
Because the previous board's intention was to try to sell.
We took it down from 5 years to 1 year, just so that we had a flexibility in the event that something catastrophic happened, that we needed funds for something, that we weren't tied into a 5-year lease. It was a very intelligent move. I think that, each year we're doing it as a 1 year, just in case we have that out if we need that. So I think that was the smart move. But, to subdivide the property, to do all the engineering that would be involved in that is very expensive.
Okay, I want to give Mr. O'Donnell the final comment. We're going to return to public comments.
Okay, I just want to say that I am on the liaison committee, and nothing of that sort was said during our meeting. So I just want to put that on the record, please, that nothing that I can recall was said that has anything to do with anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who is in person before we go to anybody attending virtually that would like to comment at this time? Okay, do we have anybody on the Zoom chat who is raising their hand to speak? Okay, we'll give them 10 more seconds, 20 more seconds before we close it to public comments. We're good? Okay, we'll close it to the public at this time. And move on to item E, which is a review of the public meeting agenda. That should be in your packets. Are there questions or comments from board members? Okay, if there's no questions, then we will move on to item F, which is correspondence.
Please review the correspondence on page 2 and 3, and note that there is also an addendum that lists 17.
Okay, thank you. Item G, Mr. Vino.
Yes, and just as a follow-up to, excuse me, to Ms. Alinsky's correspondence, we are noting on the agenda tonight some retirements. So I would just like to publicly congratulate and thank those members of our Vernon Township School District educational community who are retiring. I think that Mr. Dunlap already recognized Mrs. Pisac, who has served in several administrative positions here in the district. Kathy Davenport, who's a Glen Meadow Middle School teacher, but also a fine coach, as well as several other folks. Congratulations upon your retirement. May I continue with item G?
Yes, and I just want to reiterate that congratulations on behalf of the board to all of our retirees.
Thank you. Item G, the first discussion item, excuse me, is COVID notifications. This was a request of one of our board members, just as a general statement. Under COVID guidelines, which we've been dealing with for more than a year now, I can't believe I'm even saying that, under the Department of Health recommendations, the superintendent of schools or designee is required to notify the community when there has been a positive case of COVID. Therefore, I have followed suit in doing that. The letter needs not have any personally identifiable information in it and only needs to reflect the positive COVID case, whether it is a staff member or a student. We will sometimes include other data, but always try to keep that data to a minimal because we cannot share any personal information. I don't know if there's a request from the board on the timeliness of the notifications. In the beginning, I think I was sending them daily. Now I'm sending them about once a week. Again, there's no requirement from the state that says when they have to be sent, but just that the community remains informed.
So the information in those letters is the same each time, right? The number of cases and what like, could you tell us just for the record, what you're trying to inform on?
Yeah, I mean, it's my responsibility to notify the community that there has been a positive case in a certain school. And I always reflect the date that's on there, which is in all the letters, is the date that the child or the adult tested positive. That's how the Department of Health categorizes those cases. There is no requirement to say whether or not there were close contacts or no close contacts. I received some criticism about that this week, so there may be some changes in regards to that. All of the close contacts information goes through first our COVID nurse and the local administration, and then through the Department of Health. The Department of Health assists us with contact tracing, ensuring that we follow up appropriately with anybody who may be considered a close contact based upon the requirements under the Department of Health. So, and I think as many people know, the close contact is somebody within 6 feet for about 20 minutes. That does change whether we're in orange or yellow, and that has happened. Those changes occur when the Department of Health guidelines change, and they've changed probably a dozen times in the last year. We get updates periodically.
So just, I don't know if you're referring to my email to you when you say criticism, it wasn't meant as a criticism.
Oh,
just
no,
so
I
you know.
wasn't. I don't even recall the
Okay.
email that you're talking about.
So the thing that I had asked about was the whether it was the same each time that, that you were giving the number of cases and the number of close contacts each time. And I was confused by when the letters were going out. I think you referred to this, whether it was sparked by a case or whether it's on a specific date every
No.
Wednesday or every Friday or
I mean,
whatever.
to be honest,
So-
it's when I have the opportunity
Okay.
to send the letter. I mean,
Understood.
I'd say it's every time there's 10 or every time there's 6 or every
Okay.
time, I mean, but the reality is that the system is that our COVID nurse sends Dr. McKay and I an email that says, here's the case, that we are privy to the name of the child or the staff member. We can't share that, of course. There's an extremely large spreadsheet that's maintained by all of our nurses in the district that we have access to. But the email I get says, this case was reported on this date. the name of the student or the staff member, whether or not there were any close contacts. And then I start to populate that information into a letter. And there's no rhyme or reason as to when I'm sending them out. Part of that is just the day-to-day business of the district can be quite busy sometimes. So, but I'm always trying to send out something at least on a weekly basis because I need to keep the community informed. To try to create like an always Monday at 4 o'clock thing would probably be really difficult.
Right,
But I didn't recall the email, Jen, I'm sorry.
No,
yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that. I wanted you
No.
to know that it wasn't meant critically. I just
No,
wanted
the
to
criticism I
understand
received, the criticism I received this week was when I write things like no close contacts, that's not very believable. And I said, I apologize for that, but I am following the guidelines of the Department of Health. I have since the very beginning of this whole thing. And if there's no close contacts, that was deemed by the investigators, and the investigators are medical personnel, including our COVID nurse and our nurses in the district, and then by the Department of Health. So.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. It's just helpful to know because I think when I know as a parent, I get the note and I think, oh, does this mean something? Because it's coming today. If it's good to know that,
And you'll notice, more recently in every letter, it does say, if there's close contact, it'll say all close contacts have been contacted by the Department of Health. So part of the reason I think the Department of Health asked for us to provide this information even a year ago was so that this is still anxiety producing, even a year later for everybody, right? The letter goes out and you think, what does that mean for me? If your child happens to be a close contact, you're not going to find out in that letter that the superintendent sent. You're getting a personal phone call from the administrator and or the nurse of that particular building.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
You're
Karen,
welcome.
I just had a question about that. I'm okay. I like the way it comes out once a week because if I got one every day, I think it would drive me nuts. Like, what's going on? But if we do have a bigger situation, would that be notified a little quicker? Like not wait for towards the end of the week to sum it up, but we had to close a school or something like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and we did earlier in the year, Mr. Smaglia. So back in October, I guess, was the first time we had to close Lounsbury Hollow. So that letter went immediately. And I hate to say it, as we've gotten better at dealing with an awful situation, that the process has gotten a little bit smoother. In the beginning, Dr. McKay and I would rush to the building and we would go through every schedule, every piece of paper. Was the child on the bus? Were they in a special needs classroom where there was an aide are they on a sports team? We still do that now, but every administrator and nurse in each building has been trained to go through the process to properly identify the children or the adults who may have been close contacts. But if there was something more serious, certainly. And I will say probably the biggest challenge for our community, and I know for our faculty, is that in the beginning, the rules were that if there were 2 positive cases in a building, you closed for 14 days. And we had that in October at Lounsbury. The first time it happened at Lounsbury and happened in a couple of other places. As COVID has gone on and the research, I guess, has changed, the guidance to us now says that if the cases can be identified and it was not a school transmission, the Department of Health does not recommend closing. And I know that's really difficult for a lot of people to understand. For me too, all I can do is follow directives that I'm given from the Department of Health in making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. But certainly if there were anything more serious, there'd be an immediate notification through school messenger, Facebook, et cetera.
I would like to add, I was the board member who made this request to Ms. Davino. I asked about the COVID notifications because school was being reopened from a hybrid to a full-time model. And I understand that.
Looks like
Between faculty, staff, parents. Excuse me?
Oh, you froze for a second there.
Oh, I was saying that I understand from parents, faculty, administration, staff, and students who are older and understand. I would like to see the notifications continue regularly, preferably on a weekly basis, so that way everybody is made aware. And parents who have to make the decision of Should I send my child back full time? Should I keep them hybrid? These may be factors that shape their decisions. And I believe in allowing everybody in the whole school community and neighborhood community to be aware on a weekly basis. So that way the best decisions can be made by all parties to keep themselves, their families, and everything safe, because everybody has different ideas of what they would like to do for their families. And that's why I had asked for the notifications to if they were going to continue. So while I can't give a directive as an individual member, I really would appreciate to see the letters continue to go out on a weekly basis.
Teresa, thank you for bringing that up. I think you're absolutely correct in the way families feel. And in even the first week, we had families who said, we're going to wait. Our children are going to come back to school full time, but I don't want to send them this week. I'm going to wait and see how things go after the Easter break. So we will certainly continue to send out the letters on a regular basis, at least on a weekly basis. If it's helping community members make a decision of whether or not to send their children, I think it's important. Again, we're still in a pandemic. While things feel more normalized, I think in some settings, it's quite difficult for many families to make decisions, and it's still a really scary time. So my plan was to continue sending those items out on a regular basis to keep the community informed.
No, thank you very much. And I think it also, another component is for our school community, for them to also be informed. That's very important. You know, they're just as important as our families. Without our families, we wouldn't have our school community. Without our school community, we wouldn't have our families. So as long as we all work together and have this information out and available for everybody, that really would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, the last piece I'll share is that when something goes out, the first thing I'll do is send a notification to the board. And the board members know this. This notification will go out sometime later today. Then I will actually email the faculty. I'll send it to the district so that all our school community, like Teresa indicated, they'll get the notification next. FYI, this is going out to the community later. And then it goes out to the community at large. So even though it's a few notifications, it was something that that we talked about through the VTEA leadership meetings that I've been having weekly since January, you know, to try to keep the faculty and staff notified prior to going out, you know, to the community at large. So the layers are the board, the employees of the district, and then to everybody. So.
Okay, thank you.
May I continue?
Yes.
Okay. Recommendations, number 1, it is recommended that the board approve the following faculty staff resignations, retirements, terminations, leaves, transfers, assignment changes, appointments, stipends, salary adjustments, student teaching, mentoring as listed. And for the members of the board, the table starts at the bottom of page 3, goes on to page 5, and there are just a few items on the addendum as well.
Can we have a motion for recommendation G1?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sweeney, second. Second. Second by Mr. O'Donnell. Questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Luthner? Yes. Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Ms. Pellet?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata?
Abstain.
Mr. Semiglia?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 2, it is recommended that the board approve the settlement agreement and release for docket numbers AR-2021-117 and EU 22-HE-68085, and that the agreement be executed, filed, and implemented.
Can we have a motion for recommendation G2?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sweeney, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Luthner. Questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
No.
Ms. Pellet?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mr. Semaglia?
Yes.
Ms. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Luthner?
Yes.
Item 3, It is recommended that the board approve the 2020-2021 state funding resolution regarding state legislator support of all school districts for equitable state funding, attachment WS-1.
We have a motion for G3.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. O'Donnell, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sweeney. Questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Sorry, Mr. Nunziata, I have a question. Where did this come from? What organization is it established with?
That's a good question, Teresa. This is from the SOS organization, the Support Our Schools organization that we, gosh, was it last year or 2 years ago? 2 years ago, I think, that the Vernon School District decided to be a part of. The SOS group represents the S2 districts in the state of New Jersey. My fellow board members know that there are over 100 school districts in New Jersey who received, under the School Funding Reform Act, less state aid than we have in the past, to the tune of about $10 million over about 6 years.
And are all of those districts in SOS that are participating with it sending this
Resolution.
resolution?
I don't know the answer to that yet. What I can tell you is that I will probably know that by the end of April. The push from SOS was to ask that S2 districts pass this resolution. And I do know the folks that are in charge with SOS are collecting data to find out how many of those districts. So there's a Google sheet that's to keep track of them. Right now, it looks like the numbers are quite high. There are at least 80 districts that have passed the resolution so far. I did look at it earlier today, but not everybody has met for April. So I don't know the total number of participants, but it does look like the folks, the S2 districts that are part of SOS, the large majority are participating in passing this resolution.
Okay, and then, I'm sorry, just refresh my memory. Maybe you mentioned this and I didn't hear. How many districts are participating with SOS in New Jersey?
I think it's about 100.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Ms. Pellet?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mr. Semaglia?
Yes.
Ms. Coughlin?
Abstain.
Ms. Luthner? Yes. Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Okay,
Motion carries.
thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Item H, Ms. Linsky.
Okay, the discussion items are the personnel report, the enrollment report, harassment, intimidation and bullying, random drug testing and school safety reports.
So let's pause there and see if we have any questions on those first three items. Are there any questions or comments on the personnel or enrollment reports or the HIB reports which were reviewed earlier? Okay, thank you.
Okay, you have the board meeting calendar for the dates July through December. You set through June.
I'm
And
sorry, Ms. Linsky, I have a question about the WS3, the numbers for the per grade. Dr. McKay, do we have any numbers for kindergarten registration for next year yet?
We have some, but they're not confirmed yet. But we will have more kindergarten. We will have a larger
Do you have
kindergarten.
any idea what the numbers are
No, I
now?
can find out for you right now.
All right,
though.
thank you.
Yep,
Thank you.
Are you anticipating,
a larger kindergarten class?
well,
Absolutely.
not just larger than this year, but larger than the previous?
Yes, I
Years.
am, based on the fact that the kindergarten class was much smaller this year. As we've talked about before, we're sitting at 167 in kindergarten in 2021, where we have averaged over the past 5 years about 220, 216 to 220. So we know that we're missing some students, or we assume we are missing some students because of COVID, which makes perfect sense.
So you believe that parents were not sending their kids to kindergarten, they were waiting a year?
Yes, I do.
And we have, for the preschool, we have a waiting list for next year?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Is there any consideration of adding a class?
Yes, There is consideration
Okay.
of adding a fifth class.
What level does that put us on in preschool if we have a waiting list?
What level?
Yeah,
What-
how many?
How many,
Kids? I mean,
how
we're
many
looking at
students?
66 now.
It would bring us back up to the number where we usually are, which is somewhere between 90 and 105.
Thank you, Dr. McKay.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Dr. Linsky.
We were on the the board meeting calendar. Does anybody have any questions? It says here Thursday, August 19th or the 26th. Typically in August, we'll have our meeting later in the month for any last minute summer retirements or hiring that needs to be approved prior to the start of the school year so we can open our doors in September. Does anybody have a preference between those two dates?
No.
Okay, I think, so you want to look at the 19th as opposed to the 26th?
I think so.
Or do you think the 26th is better, just based on what Mr. Nunziata said? In other words, like the last minute hiring, is it better to wait until the 26th because we're closer to September? Or better to do the 19th? What do you think? It's so hard. Personnel.
Anybody
it's
knows the
crazy.
last 2 weeks
Oh my
going
gosh.
into the school year, people come in and sign up for school and
Yeah.
it changes everything.
It does.
So if
Some
you
people
wait till
register in
later, it's
September.
easier to do the personnel piece. However, it's okay. There's a thing called emergent hire, which we can
Right.
do and then post date it
September.
back.
Yeah.
So it's not.
That's why I just wanted to check on the personnel piece if
Yeah.
you felt one way or the other.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No preference to me.
Other members of the board? What works better for the administration then?
Can we flip a coin? Which do we want to do,
Then
Chen?
go with the 26th if that works for everybody.
Okay, so we'll go with August 26th for our public meeting in August.
Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns about the other dates? No? Everybody good? All right. Ms. Linsky, item 5.
We have the Delta Dental discussion on whether we switch carriers from Blue Cross Blue Shield to Delta Dental as of July 1. My recommendation is it offers more in-network providers, and the district will realize some savings from it. So I think it benefits the employees and the district. So my recommendation is that we make the switch.
Is there a way that we could get a comparison on who is on what plan? Like, do they give you a printout of local dentists that are on this plan and local dentists that are on that plan? Like, do they do that?
I could get a listing, yes.
Kelly, if I saw the chart that Tom put up there earlier, it looked like there was only 5 people that were affected by a difference in doctors. When he put that up there, I, looked at the different numbers of, who would be in network and out of network and that type of thing. I think it came out to 5 people would be affected in some way.
5 staff members, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Linsky, what type of savings are you anticipating by making the switch?
In the first year, it could be anywhere between $40,000 to $100,000. And then going into the second year, there will be additional savings because Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield will raise their rates at that time, where Delta Dental will hold for 2 years. The rates will not change. So I can't measure what the second year will be, but we know in the first, it should be between 40 and 100,000.
Will you be putting a recommendation for action on next week's agenda?
Yes. It is equal to or better than coverage.
Okay, and have you had conversations, or will you be having conversations with the VTEA and VTAA to go over some of these changes?
Yes.
Okay.
And are we going to, when we vote, are we going to see like a snapshot of the cost savings? Will there be one on the screen so that we can see that or no?
If you'd like, sure, I could do that.
I just think that way the public
The
can see.
public can see it, yeah.
Okay.
So the commitment from Delta is that they're giving us a rate for next year and the following year that's not going to change. And the board can save the first year around $40,000 and more if people opt for the different coverages. And the following year, we can't gauge because Horizon Blue Cross is going to be increasing their rates. We don't know what their increase is, but Delta Dental is not. So we're going to save at least 40 plus. So it's financially, it's a wise decision on the board's part. You were providing more dentists in the network, and it's going to be slightly cheaper to the employees, and cheaper for the board.
And we're not paying the commission on Delta Dental, correct? We would only.
Delta Dental is paying the commission.
Right.
And then once we meet with the unions, if we can have some feedback as to where their head is at as well, once they get presented with the numbers and the providers, that would be helpful.
All right. If any board members have questions over the next week, please reach out to Ms. Linsky's office, and I'm sure she would happily go over those questions with you. All right, recommendations?
It is recommended that the board approve professional development travel that complies with the provisions of NJSA 18A:11-12.
Can we have a motion for recommendation 1?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. O'Donnell, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pellet. Questions or comments? Seeing none, can we please have a roll call vote?
Ms. Pellet?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes.
Mr. Annunziata?
Yes.
Mr. Semaglia?
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Luther?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Motion carries. Recommendation 2.
It is recommended that the board approve reestablishing Vernon Township School District's pre-K program in Walnut Ridge for the 2021-2022 school year.
Can we have a motion for recommendation 2? Motion by Ms. Pellet, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Zimmerman. Questions or comments?
I requested to see the financials on that, a snapshot of what that would look like. Do you have that prepared today that we could take a look at it?
I don't. It is within the budget. There would be an extra RPO position. There will be a secretary position and a custodial position.
But we don't have the numbers?
I could tell you off the top of my head, it is probably less than 150,000, be around that amount.
Because when we decided to put the school on the market, we were saving 300,000. So I don't know how we're not going back to that 300,000. That it would only be 150. It doesn't make sense.
You don't have an administrator in the building, I believe.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's no additional administrative cost because Dr. McKay and I both have our principal certifications, and therefore we would be, the school would run essentially under our certification. The nurse is already in the budget because even though we're operating 5 schools right now, we have 6 nurses. One is our quote COVID nurse that we've been utilizing this year for COVID. So that would be part of the breakage, I think, that Ms. Mitchell is talking about between the 300,000 and the 150. So I think you mentioned the positions that needed to come back there. And I don't know this, but the other differential, I'm guessing, Ms. Linsky, would probably be things like energy use. I mean, obviously the energy use this year, I'm assuming, is down at Walnut Ridge because only the other half of the building is being used. So I would imagine we would see an increase in energy use and cost and perhaps some other ancillary things. Yes?
Yes.
So,
Okay.
so this topic has come up at the board table a couple times over the last 6 months, I'd say. It came up during the budget conversation, but what is driving your recommendation that you relocate the building from Cedar Mountain back to Walnut Ridge?
I think there are a couple of things, and it actually stems on the conversation that Mr. Sweeney brought up before when he talked about enrollment. We noticed a trend, excuse me, this year. A lot of people held their children back in kindergarten. We have a low number of kindergartners. I would have done the same thing if I were the parents of a 5-year-old during a pandemic. I probably would have held them back a year from starting school. I'm imagining we're going to open our schools in September very much the way they look now, with social distancing guidelines in effect, be that 3 feet or 6 feet, I don't know. But masks on. I think school is going to look the same way as it does right now. I hope I'm wrong. But we need to have as much space as we can to make sure that our kids are spaced apart appropriately. And with the anticipated number of children in kindergarten next year, and even the waiting list we already have for pre-K, I don't think it would be wise to keep those 3 grade levels over at Cedar Mountain for next year. Dr. McKay, did you want to add to any of that?
Yeah, presently I've just checked with Matt Shea to check in. It looks like almost 130 students are already signed up for kindergarten. That's ahead of previous years because it's still early. This is April.
It's very early, yes.
Yeah, yes. So again, we'll see how that plays out. And we will not be doing anything based on not having hard facts, but as we get the hard facts on our students, we know that if the kindergarten classes increase, we'll need more classrooms in Cedar Mountain for them. And if we bring the pre-K over to this building, we can open it up to 5 classrooms.
Currently, how many preschool classrooms are we utilizing?
We have 4.
4?
But we can move it to 5.
And how many kindergarten classrooms are we utilizing?
At present time, there are 8. In past, we've had as many as 10.
And how many first grade classrooms are we utilizing?
Presently 10.
10.
Yes, so those numbers.
So you currently have 22 classrooms being used in Cedar Mountain?
Right. So, but there's other classrooms being used as
Right,
well.
for
specials
others,
and other
for
pieces.
specials, but
Yes.
22 homeroom classes.
Right.
So you do not believe that you will be able to fit those into Cedar Mountain next year based upon your projections?
Based on our projections, but most importantly, based on where we are with COVID, it's a situation where if we had the students over here, we would have more space.
We also have virtual students at Cedar Mountain that are not in school.
True.
So that's adding to, and the class size is high because of that. You know, the virtual classes are outside, but I think it's an average of 24 kids in kindergarten right now.
Right.
So, and Dr. McKay, do you have any idea what we started the school year at, say, in terms of entire population of students, and how many have been added because of all of the housing that has been sold and purchased?
No, I don't have an exact number, but what we have usually with our population, some people transfer out, other people transfer in, and it's usually a zero-sum game. But we have added students this year.
This year we have.
And there are families that have moved into Highland Lakes and other areas, wonderful families that we can't wait to have their students, but their students are finishing elsewhere virtually.
Mm-hmm.
So they live here, they're finishing up virtually elsewhere, and we hope to embrace them and have them join us as we move on. So there's that piece as well. But again, this is, we're making assumptions. We're just trying to judge where we are right now and where we might be.
We have to plan for that.
That's exactly right.
We do have to plan for that, but without any numbers, I mean, we have no numbers in front of us.
Mhm.
How do we make a decision on something? I asked on Tuesday to have very definitive numbers because we knew we were having this conversation, and we don't have any numbers in front of us. How could we possibly make a decision without the information we need?
I do have a suggestion. Pardon me, I don't know if it helps. I mean, part of the reason that this is on the agenda, excuse me, there are 2 reasons. The first is that there are reports that each district has to file with the Department of Education. One of the reports that we have to file has to do with the number of operational schools that we are going to have for the following school year. That report is due. So that's why And if you recall, when Mr. Kepnes was here and we no longer were using Walnut Ridge, we also had a report to the Department of Education that we were no longer using Walnut Ridge as a school, right? There were no children being educated in this building. So that's the reason for this being on the agenda now. I don't know the process for removing it in the future. I would imagine there has to be. Imagine a school district says we're going to use a school, and for whatever reason, it doesn't come to fruition, whether in another district, if something like that occurred, I don't know that we have the opportunity to remove it down the road. I certainly understand your concerns. We did take a look at some of these things in our budget discussion during the last meeting, and those line items for Walnut Ridge have been populated, if I'm not mistaken, I think since the last budget discussion that we had.
I just think it's really frustrating when a board member asks a very specific question and asks to be prepared and come into the meeting with a prepared, item that is itemized, and we're here, we have no numbers, we don't know anything about the water, and, we talked about that, we don't have an update on that. I can't imagine that we could sit here and vote on this and just basically shoot from the hip with nothing in front of us.
I'm sorry, what was the water reference? I'm not,
Well, there's a water issue here too that we discussed. We don't know the remedy to that.
we voted the lead in the pipes?
Right.
We voted on that.
No, I understand we did,
Right.
but, we don't have an update on that. We don't have any numbers on staffing here. And that was asked for. And I just don't understand how that could be, how a board member could email and ask for that, to be prepared, and we're sitting here and there's no presentation and we're asked to vote. I just don't understand how that could be.
Kelly, I apologize. I understand your frustration. On the March 18th board meeting, we went through a line-by-line budget comparison, and although we didn't go through it publicly line by line, as I'm looking now, allocated items are in there for Walnut Ridge. Everything, pardon me, from secretarial coverage to summer curriculum to supplies and materials to, mileage and travel to, as many people, general supplies, as most people know, I think on the board, when you're looking at a line by line comparison, these things are noted by a WR for Walnut Ridge. So those things were in the line by line budget comparison that was distributed on March 18th. We could, of course, go through and tabulate all of that for the members of the board for the specific total dollar amount, and perhaps that's what you're asking for.
Well,
And if we missed that, I apologize, Kelly.
We have a fiduciary responsibility to the community. That's one of our number one items, and I have nothing in front of me on that.
It was distributed, though, at the last board meeting.
If we moved the kindergarten in here?
Yeah, everything is here. Electricity for Walnut Ridge. Everything is in the budget, assuming that Walnut Ridge would be open. We would never just open Walnut Ridge without the board's approval. Ground supplies for Walnut Ridge is in the line by line. Everything.
And the staff members are in there that you're going to hire because we don't even know what staff members.
Well, we don't need to hire staff. Well, we may need to hire one. Let me backtrack for one. If we do add one section of pre-K, we would have to hire a staff member. Other than that, remember, we're taking the same folks who are teaching pre-K now at Cedar Mountain, and they're just moving to Walnut Ridge. So there's no additional teachers. There are a couple of additional staff members that Ms. Slinsky pointed out. We would be looking to have a secretary, but not a door monitor, but there's some cost savings there because the way the front door is set up here at Walnut Ridge, a secretary would be able to admit somebody in that double entry without having a door monitor. And quite honestly, that may result in a transfer from another school, but I can't speak to that right now. That really depends. So a secretary could be transferred, which of course does not add to the additional cost. I think Ms. Linsky talked about a custodian, which of course is necessary, and an RPO.
Dr. McKay, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is the deciding factor on whether or not we do this really hinging on enrollment? if we do need to do this, if we have X number of children that are coming in and part of the kindergarten program, that we will have to do this?
Well, there will come a point if a population increases that you would have to do this.
But I mean, given COVID and everything else, if we have so many people, so many of these kids in kindergarten, it makes a lot of sense to do this for safety purposes, et cetera.
Right.
So why couldn't we just pass this recommendation here and put numbers on it? If the enrollment does this, then we have to do this. Whether financially or not, it doesn't really make a difference. If we have to do it, we have to do it.
Well, it's also for COVID distancing, no?
I'm sorry?
Wasn't it also for COVID distancing?
Well, that's what I said, for
Oh,
safety
okay.
purposes because of COVID. Because, I mean, if a certain number of children are in that kindergarten and in, the other school, then we need to do this.
Keeps them separate.
So whether it's going to be another teacher or whatever, isn't really going to make a difference at that point. So I would feel more comfortable if we put some numbers on it and said, if the enrollment's this, then we're going to do this. If it's not, then we won't.
The
So I have a
challenge,
question.
yeah, I'm sorry, the challenge is that the only reason this was on for tonight, because, listen, I mean, I agree, we have never, in the time I've been here, almost 3 years, have had a motion on the agenda without a discussion, right? Normally, we would see a discussion item and then a motion at the next meeting. The reason that this is on here reflected the way it is because the state needs to know whether or not we're using the school for instructional purposes next year. So my apologies, when we have reports due to the state, these are the things that sometimes occur without maybe the due diligence that we would normally do.
So what happens if we change?
What is this? That brings another question to mind. Okay, what is the deadline, number one? And number two, if we say, no, we're not using it, after that deadline, can we come back and say, yes, we are, or can we not?
I don't think so. I think that
I think you would have to go with it and
We
then
should do the opposite.
do the opposite of what
Right.
you just
My
said.
point exactly.
And
that.
it's April 23rd is the deadline.
So
It
the
was
safety
April
valve is to say,
16th.
yes, we're doing it, because we can always say, no, we're not.
Yes.
But if we say we're not doing it, we can't go back and say we're going to do it.
Correct.
Well, and if we're talking about 23 kids in a kindergarten classroom, right, I mean, that's a lot of kids. We clearly are going to need more kindergarten classrooms. I mean, it sounds like the kindergartners that we have now that are going to first grade, we can take some of those teachers, right? We're not talking about additional kindergarten teachers
Right.
and kind of have them loop around
That's exactly right.
Somebody,
Because your smaller class is moving up to
is
first
moving up
grade.
to first grade.
So you move your teacher.
First grade teachers.
Charles?
what I'm just looking at here, are just the numbers, and if we get rid of the preschool, even if it doubles, right? I think you said 130, even if it doubles, we're still looking at less students, about 70 less students that are going to be in Glen Meadow. Cedar Mountain, right? Because you're only going to put the two grade levels are only going to be
Right,
in
then it
there.
would just be the 2 grade levels. Yeah.
So that's 70, that's like 3 classrooms or whatever. How does, for me to feel comfortable, I think I just want to know, like, that's fine if we have to do it. But why, if we're going to have that much extra room now in Cedar Mountain, what is it going to be utilized? Is it going to be utilized for keep the population down in the school? I would just like to feel more comfortable that it is we're almost going to lose it, but, if those numbers are correct, it's like 70 students is still going to be short in that school. So what are we going to do? What's the benefit of having such a small, I'm sorry if I'm rambling a little
No,
bit.
that's
but-
okay, that's okay.
No, but I think the real decision here that makes it a no-brainer is the fact that if we say yes, we can always say, no, we're not going to do it.
But you
if we
don't
say
know that.
no,
Do
we have a problem.
You don't know that.
Do we get to vote
Sure
again?
you
on
can.
Said that.
Of course.
You can.
Yeah, certainly.
If we have to remove the
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
They just said that. They just said that if we say yes and we tell the state yes, we can always
Always
not
hold
utilize it. But if we tell the state no, then we're in trouble if we do need it.
I don't
And
know
I
if that's
just feel
true.
like it's a different story if we're talking about that it's not even on our radar in the budget. It was already budgeted for with the anticipation that we are going to have. to
It was in the line by line budget that we were given on March 18th.
And I believe they were working on the classrooms and painting the classrooms and we
Oh, yeah,
toured
just
them
in
and
case.
just,
I would like to share Ms. Mitchell's frustration. We had agreed as a board that when a board member requests information, that information will be supplied as data. So we as board members can support our administration to make the best decisions possible for our students and school community. Ms. Mitchell is stating that she had requested this information. It has not been supplied. We have nothing to look at. Board members are making decisions at the moment based on their own personal opinions with no data. That is fine if that is their own personal decision, but a board member made a request for the information and it was not supplied. That's one thing. Secondly, Walnut Ridge was supposed to be sold. We currently have a school that is not for sale any longer. So therefore, if this was all in the budget and it was given to us at the last board meeting, then there should have been a discussion. If everyone knew that the April date was coming up, that we had to notify the state whether or not a school would be utilized, that would have been known. And since it would have been known, the board should have been notified. In addition to being notified, I sat at that seat a few weeks ago and I went through a budget line by line and started asking questions. And apparently, we are only supposed to be doing macro as opposed to micro. So now we're being pointed out that it's perfectly fine to do micro. This board in the past, I have sat on this board for 6 years. I am one of the longest standing members, and I have been in education for 25 years. This board has always had multiple budget meetings, multiple. We have sat together as a board and had multiple budget meetings to go through on a micro level. This year, we have had barely any budget discussions or meetings the way that we used to. So when the whole culture of the board shifts so quickly, people are going to get frustrated. There are new members on the board. When new members used to come on, when there was not elections, what would happen was having those budget meetings really brought the new members up to speed and was able to have everyone understand what was happening. And this board has always gone micro. So to now say that we should only be macro, and then to be like, oh, but here it was, when a board member specifically asked for that information to be extracted from the budget and put to the side to actually show the board members. So basically, the board members right now will be making a decision without any data under a gun timeline. And I don't understand how we're even supposed to be able to make this decision. If this was planned for and classrooms were being painted and all of this was happening, then why wasn't the board notified months ago? I have asked numerous times, what is happening with Walnut Ridge? There's never been an explanation. And now here we are put under a time frame, a very tight time frame, that we have to put 4 classes in here. Last time I checked, this board was celebrating all the money that we would save by selling the school building because we were losing $10 million. And this was supposed to be a way for this board to be able to recoup money. As Mr. Higgins pointed out, there's millions of dollars now. In addition, we now have all of this personnel that we have to have up there. We have to have an RPO. And is the nurse going to be, since we have 6 nurses, one of whom is acting as a COVID nurse, will there be a nurse inside the building full time? Well, next year, come September, we no longer have a COVID nurse. And then therefore the nurse will only be in Walnut Ridge. Like, these are decisions as a board we should be able to know, and it should be a financial decision. It should be a space decision to make the best decisions for our students for space during COVID and at this time. It should be a decision of looking at the numbers, showing the board the actual numbers of the teachers and the students and who's going to move where. But for us to make this decision, like I said, I'm sitting here watching this and I'm just sharing with Kelly's frustration, because that information truly would have been pertinent to this board to make the best educated decision financially and educationally in the best interest of student achievement for our students.
I think Mr. O'Donnell asked a question about when the report was due, but I don't think I heard the answer. I can.
Oh,
get that one.
the first date was the 16th, and the state just put out that it's due the 23rd. Unfortunately, that still falls before our next board meeting. There's always a chance the state's going to say, hey, now it's not due till May,
Right.
whatever, but that's very, very rare, Edina. In fact, it's rare that that the state pushes a date back. But
I'm
yeah.
just wondering, because there are some concerns here, and I think that
Certainly.
we need to pay attention to them.
Mhm.
Is there a way, and I may be way off base and everybody may be opposed, is there a way to move this to a one item meeting
No,
before?
You're not off base at all, Adina, and that
actually
was
have
going to be my
another-
suggestion.
I have
Okay.
another thought, though.
Because I'd be willing.
May I share rather than scheduling a single purpose meeting, although I'm certainly not opposed to that. My other thought is that, could there be a consideration to consider the recommendation with the sole purposes of utilizing it, for state reporting procedures to revisit next week or whenever you'd like to, for the thorough discussion on whether or not the board would like to open this building to use for pre-K. Do you understand what I mean? My point is that what Teresa was saying before is accurate. If we complete the report to the state that says we are using this building, and then for some reason we change our mind, that's okay. But if we don't say that we're going to use it and then decide we're going to, we can't do that with the state of New Jersey.
But if we vote
I-
the way it's written now. it's
Yeah.
Right, I said
approved,
to
and-
amend,
yeah.
to amend the wording.
So we'd have to
I'm
change.
Yeah,
I'm not in favor of doing it that way. I don't think
Okay.
that's the cleanest way of doing it. I think that the board was provided with financial data in the last work session, in the last iteration of the budget that showed where the funds were allocated to Walnut Ridge. I believe I even asked the question because Walnut Ridge came up at one point. I said, is that in this budget? And the answer was yes. However, I share the frustration that we should have known sooner that this report was due in the middle of April and that a decision by the board would be due by this meeting so that our backs were not up against the wall. So because the report is not due until April 23rd, that gives us all of next week to reconvene as a board, to have all of the information in front of us when we're making this decision, and to do this the right way. I think that we should do this the right way if we're going to make a decision of this size. I'd like to hear if the board is in favor of that, and if so, I'd like to schedule a meeting for next week and I'm sure it won't be lengthy. It should probably be about an hour to an hour and a half because that will be the only topic of the meeting.
Well, Justin, to Teresa's point, maybe we should add to that a budget discussion.
Yeah, and I think that
and make that part of that meeting, because in reality, I agree with her that we haven't had a lot of discussions on the budget. And now that we have something that's a little more solid than what we started with a month ago, because Teresa put this, together really nice, maybe we should have a meeting with the budget and this, and it kind of gets two jobs done.
It's a great idea.
It's a very good idea.
Yeah.
I would totally agree to that.
the board has had numerous budget discussions, but I'm in favor of having an
Nothing,
additional
nothing
one.
that looks like what we have over the years, though. I mean, we have not talked about.
We
the
have
budget.
had single-purpose budget meetings, and we've had a budget conversation at every work session for the last 3 months.
I think if
But
you
we
look
But
at
I'm,
your,
but I'm absolutely in favor of Mr. O'Donnell's suggestion and Ms. Coughlin's suggestion of having an additional conversation about that at that meeting next week. Is everybody in favor of having a meeting at some point next week? We typically meet on Thursdays. Our Thursday meeting, or our public meeting for this month, is the following week. So since most of our calendars are built around Thursday nights being free, would everybody be in favor of having a meeting on Thursday, the 22nd,
Yes.
Yes.
7 p.m.?
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. I would just like to point out one other thing. Under the board goals, this, if in case, since I'm chair of Curriculum and Technology shares a goal between finance, buildings, and grounds. District goal number 3, exercise fiscal responsibility in order to optimize the district's limited resources towards safety and student achievement, while continuing to pursue additional sources of revenue to fund what's possible. The goal is optimize/right-size the district footprint and personnel based on current and anticipated future student population. And the indicator of success is one of the indicators of success, D, evaluate current and future grade alignment within district buildings. So therefore, we would also be able to work on a board goal through that. And the three committees, the finance, buildings and grounds, and curriculum and technology, share them. So therefore, that would be a good way for us also to all come together and work on that goal as a board.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion to table recommendation H2. Can I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Second by Mr. O'Donnell. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the motion is tabled until further notice. Recommendation H3.
It is recommended that the board approve the following policy regulations for first reading.
Can we have a motion for recommendation H3?
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Lutner, second.
Second.
Second by Ms. Pellet. Questions or comments? For our newer members of the board, all policy additions, amendments, revisions, or removals have a first and a second reading. So this would be considered the first reading. So we would vote on it this evening. If you have questions or comments about any of the policies, now would be the time to ask that. And then the policy does not go into effect until after the second reading. And we'll have a second reading at our next meeting.
So will it be revised again, or?
They wouldn't, if they can be revised, but then it would go back to a first reading. Okay. If it's revised between the two.
I just have a quick question, Mr. Annunziata. It was a motion, right? The lead testing, P&R 7425. And full disclosure, I haven't read them yet to fully go through and compare for the first and the second. I was wondering, are we using the overall general one, say from Strauss Esme, or specifically ours that was catered to our district needs? When I recall Mr. Chili, when he was on the board, had, I was about to say led the lead testing, had, followed and kind of, I guess I should say led with the lead testing. Okay. So we agreed as a board to test, I want to say 3 times a year. And I just want to make sure that our
2 times per year.
Was it 3?
2 times.
Oh, 2 times. That our policies are being used and we're not just getting brand new ones from, say, Strauss Esme that are generic. I will go back and read, but I just didn't know if anyone knew the answer to that.
Teresa, I can't say with 1 zillion% certainty. I can say that I'm fairly certain that the actions that we took as a board are certainly in compliance with the law regarding, because as you mentioned, we did more than we needed to in the Vernon Township School District in comparison to the regulations. Remember that the lead testing of water in schools, those are mandated policies. So they're based on, rules and regulations that the districts need to follow. I'm fairly certain that we are doing more than we need to, but I don't know 100%. I'd have to go back and look at the regulations.
So this policy, as it's written in the proposed revision or proposed update, states that notwithstanding the results or date of any prior testing, the board shall continue to test drinking water outlets in the designated statewide required testing year, which shall be every 3rd school year, beginning with the 21-22 school year. So it looks like it's reflecting the state mandate, which the state mandate is that we test every 3rd year. Vernon tests twice per year, because we do know that we have had higher lead levels in the past. We need to continually monitor that. So I think that you raise a really good point, Ms. Coughlin, and my question for the administration would be, should the policy reflect the state mandate, or should it reflect the mandate given by the local board, because it goes above and beyond what the state is requiring?
Usually that's reflected in the regulation. In my experience, the regulation is usually the one that has more compliances in there. But I do believe that the regulation, I'm just looking now to see if it says the same thing, Mr. Nunziata, about every 3rd year. I don't know. I would imagine it does. If the board would like to modify that regulation, we can.
Well, I mean, if I could just chime in for a second, the whole board is on the policy committee. So myself, having taken specific policies into committee, we have broken down, just so all the new board members know, you can take, as a board, we can take any policy regulation. Obviously, the law has to be followed, mandates and codes, but we can shape it to meet our school district's needs. So that's why, just to fill everybody in the past, as Mr. Annunziata said, we had lead water concerns. When Mr. Chili was on the board, he was very proactive with that. And then what made me also think of it was when Kelly was just talking about the lead and Walnut Ridge, and, you know, we move forward, but we don't know the results of all of those yet. So I just want to make sure that the policies that we have currently are being transferred into the new readings. It is a big job, just to let all the new board members know. It's to sit there and compare them all. But I agree with Ms. Davino that between the policy and the regulation, they are definitely different. So, and they can be catered to meet our needs. And that's what we did with the lead water. And that was something I was very proud of this board for doing. They were very proactive, truly cared about our administration, faculty, staff, and students to make sure that the lead was taken care of and that there were constant testing going on.
I agree with that, Ms. Coughlin, and I just want to point out the section of the regulation that makes, it does allude to, I'm looking at page 4, where, did you see something on page 3 about that? Page 4 does allude to the ability for local districts to test more frequently than the state mandate. It says if the board tests drinking water outlets for lead more frequently than the 3-year cycle set forth, the notifications requirements set forth in B2B below shall apply. I am in favor of putting into our policy and regulation the local mandate that we've set to test twice annually, because that's our practice, and the policy and regulation should reflect our practice. So I agree with you.
Mr. Nunziata, where would you like that reflected on that item B1, which is on page 4 that you just read?
Let's see.
We can add a number 2 if you like, that indicates
Well, that's,
yeah.
that is under, if you look at the top of that section is on designated statewide required testing.
Right.
So I don't know if that's the appropriate spot.
I think it is, only because that's where it starts talking about the requirements. In other words, just previous to designated statewide required testing is the information that talks about the every 3 years. Obviously, we're doing that more often. Would you like us to amend the regulation and present at the next meeting, or do we want to amend at the table?
I would put an additional section. So if we have designated statewide required testing as an item 3, and then you see it goes on to 4 and 5.
Yes.
I think that you can put an item 6 for required
District testing.
local testing, because it's a local mandate that we've set at this board table. Would everybody agree with that train of thought?
Yeah.
No,
So a
item
separate,
6.
yeah, I think I have my pages all over the place here, so I want to make sure we're getting it
It's
right.
page 5. Well,
So,
yeah.
yeah, because that's under 2. No, I'm sorry. That's under A. That'd be A6 then, right?
Okay.
Is that correct?
Yes, that makes sense.
Be on the bottom of page. We have proposed verbiage for that. And did you say local district practices for testing? What was the heading that you'd like to see there?
Why don't we pull this policy and have this policy as a first reading?
The regulation or the policy? I'm sorry.
Why don't we pull this? Why don't we pull R7425 so we can properly make this modification, and we'll have a first reading for R7425 at the public meeting. I think that's the right way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So we need to have a motion to amend.
So moved.
Yeah, can I have a motion to amend recommendation 3 to remove regulation 7425?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Sweeney,
Second.
second by Ms. Mitchell. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion's been amended, so then we're now just voting on recommendation 3, absent of regulation
Right.
7425. Any other questions or comments on the policies for a first reading?
No, but I'd like to thank everyone and Mr. Annunziata and the superintendent for handling that. I am a little bit of a policy nerd. I absolutely love education policy. So thank you.
I
very
I
much.
appreciate you pointing that out, Ms. Coughlin. I missed that. Okay, can we have a roll call vote for recommendation 3?
Mr. Annunziata,
Yes.
Mr. Semaglia,
Yes.
Mrs. Coughlin,
Yes.
Mrs. Lufner,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Ms. Pellet,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes.
Motion carries. Okay, item I is public participation for items on the agenda or any other business. We'll begin with members of the public who are here in attendance in person. You'll have 5 minutes. Please step up to the podium, state your name, part of town.
I came to pretty much every board meeting and work session for about a 3.5-year period. And at one point I got frustrated and stopped coming because I really didn't see much getting done. And tonight, I won't say not much getting done, but a lot of confusion. And tonight seems to be a perfect example of this. We sit in Lounsbury Hollow, I don't remember if it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, from 7 o'clock until 11:30 at night doing a budget review. And at the end of that, it was pointed out that they had just spent 4.5 hours looking at 17% of the budget. Nobody ever addressed compensation. That's 83% of our cost. And nobody looked at it. Nobody said a word about it. And of that 17% that we looked at, a lot of it was fixed cost. Buses, electricity. So I don't really know how much budget you're looking at. I'm going to read something. I hope I'll have time to get through it. But I posted this recently. It said, and now it's just gone away, of course, because I tried to open it. I posted something recently on a site about staffing and about our reduction in costs. We've known for a long time that we were losing revenue. We're going to be losing state aid. And it was addressed every year. Mr. Kepnes would bring it up, the board would all agree, but then they would go ahead and spend money just like it hadn't happened. And I'm wasting my time because I can't find this posting. I really do want to read it to you. It's the whole reason I'm here. This is what I wrote. 2/3 of New Jersey school districts will see increases in their state aid. Unfortunately, all but 2 Sussex County districts experienced cut in state aid. Vernon was cut by 10.6%, equal to $2.1 million. The highest being Hapatcong at 27%. I feel real sorry for Art DiBenedetto. There are 2 main issues here. First, our cuts are related to a decrease in student population. We were receiving more than the formula allowed over several years, but the state continued to fund at higher levels. This was well known and discussed every year for past several years by the Board of Ed. Teresa's one of the few that were here when that was going on. Over a 10-year period, our enrollment went from close to 5,000 students with a $67 million budget to under 3,000 students with a $66 million budget. When you lose 40% of your student population and only decrease your budget by less than 2%, you failed. I would be out of a job if that happened in my work. And anybody that works in industry would be out of a job if you lost 40% of your revenue, but only cut your cost by 2%. This is an issue I raised with the board administrator, with the Board of Ed and the business administrator over several years to no avail. Now, the high school was on an 8-6 schedule, whereby there were 8 periods a day and the teachers were in the classroom 6. A few years ago, and I'm not sure just when that was, if that was 3 years ago, the high school went to a 9-5 schedule, meaning that there's now 9 periods and the teachers are only in the classroom for 5. Assurances were given this would only be for the high school. Lo and behold, Glen Meadows now on the same schedule. If teachers are only in the classroom for 5 of the 9-period day, you obviously need many more teachers. If a teacher is asked to teach a 6th period in order not to have to add another teacher, the contract calls for a stipend equal to 20% of the base salary. 3 years ago, the median salary at the high school was $97,000. So if you ask a teacher to teach a 3rd period, they could be receiving close to $20,000 a year for a 40-minute class, 180-day year. This is the main reason costs are not decreasing under the period of loss of enrollment. Compensation, salary, benefits, insurance is responsible for close to 83% of the budgeted costs. Now, before I get attacked by teachers, I'll continue. My comments are in no way meant to be an attack on teachers. I have had 3 go through the Vernon school system, 1st through 12th grade, and have a high school junior right now that's not been in school all year because of major surgery that he had, and he's homeschooling. So I've had nothing to say about kids not being in school full time because I didn't have a dog in the hunt. I felt they should be there, but since my son couldn't be, I had nothing to say about that. We have been, in most instances, blessed to have very good teachers. My comments relate to the generosity of the Board of Ed Negotiations Committee and members that have never considered their fiduciary responsibilities. It's quite simple. If you lose 40% of your customers and reduce the cost of operation by less than 2%, failure is guaranteed. Unless, of course, you're a governmental agency that always has a safety net, taxpayers. Now, I don't know most of the people on this board because they're new. I've been, like I say, I came to these meetings for a long time and I finally got so frustrated because of things just like tonight, asking to vote on things with no documentation. Or Mr. Kepnes, God bless him, he's not here anymore, coming and saying, oh, I spent this money back in August, will you approve it now in January? And I ask and ask and ask, what is the signing authority for the chief financial officer? He came to me one night and said, Mr. Dunlop, I get the idea you don't like me. I said, it has nothing to do with not liking you, but if you worked for me, I would fire you. I had to go before my board 4 times a year and explain what I was doing and have a budget laid out. And I haven't seen that with this board. And I know there's some new members, but I see us circling back to the same stuff and it really bothers me.
Excuse
I was
me,
asked to be on
I
this.
just have to ask you to raise your mask over your nose, please, because that's
Of course,
our
I
policy.
wouldn't want to get anyone ill.
Thank you.
See, this is the kind of stuff. I don't envy anybody on this board. You people have inherited a real mess. And there's only been a couple of fiscally conservative people on this board over, I would say, the last 8 to 10 years. We had a president that thought there shouldn't be more than 12 kids in a class at the lower levels. I went back and looked at my elementary pictures. I had 17 in my 1st grade. I had 22 in my 2nd grade. I don't know what the answer is, but what I'm seeing here is not the answer. And people come and complain, but don't offer answers or solutions. I think the best thing that could happen is to try to get back to an 8-6 schedule. If I hired someone and told them that their hours of work were from 9 to 4, but they only had to work to 1 o'clock, and from 1 to 4, they could do what they wanted to do, what a great deal. They get a pre-planning period, a post-planning period, a lunch period, and a civic duty period. Our teachers are in the classroom at Glen Meadow and at the high school for 5 periods of a 9-period day. It's unsustainable. We had close to 5,000 students. We were spending $67 million. We now have less than 3,000 students and we're spending $66 million. Not this board, but the Board of Education has failed, in my opinion. And I'm sure I've gone over my time. Thank you for allowing me. Do I have any time?
You're at.
Because if I do, the only
six-
comment I would have is
6.5
that
minutes.
my only comment would be is I thought I heard that the enrollment was up in the kindergarten. But if I look at your attachment, it shows us down.
No, just to clarify that comment,
It's anticipated.
it's up for where we are at this point in the enrollment period, because it's only April. We have more students.
New registrations for next year
right.
are up compared to previous years.
New registrations. We've
Yes.
heard, okay.
Yes.
Because when I looked at the numbers, I saw that we had 90 last year and we have 66 this year,
That's
60
pre-K.
That's pre-K.
pre-K.
And kindergarten enrolls all
And
the
the
way.
kindergarten went from 230 something to 160 something. So
That's
the
right.
numbers continue to drop even at the lower levels.
We think we have an explanation for that. We were saying that people held their kids out because of COVID. We think that's the reason. That is why we're anticipating that we might have a bigger class next year.
I hope that's the case, but I've heard that for
Of
several
course, I mean,
years.
how much, what are we going
And
to
it's
find
never
out?
happened. It's never happened. The numbers continue to drop.
Right, and Dr. McKay indicated that we're
Can
at
I, yeah,
130 enrolled students for kindergarten for the next school year already, and it's only April. So we have already almost reached what we have currently, and we haven't even gotten into the summer months yet.
Thank you for indulging me. I hope you'll take some of what I had to say to heart.
So thank you for
Can
your
I-
comments.
can I address a couple of things? First and foremost, thank you, Mr. Dunlap. It's good to see you again. The 9-period day versus the 8-period day, when you say it's 8 and 6, it's always been 8 and 5. Teachers have always taught 5, and of course, they have a duty in which they're responsible for taking care of our students as well, and along with their lunch and prep. And the situation with the budget, it's very important that everyone realizes that since 2018-19, when we first went into this crisis, and of course, Mr. Higgins remembers this as well, we have cut staff significantly. In the past 3 years, we have gone from 341 full-time staff members, teachers, and that's certified staff, that's your teachers. We've gone from 341 to 290. So we have lost 51 teachers through retire, not replace, and they have not been replaced. The savings is significant. As you pointed out, 80% or more of our budget is teachers' salaries and also teachers and administrators' salaries, and benefits. We have cut down on our aides in the past year, of course, due to the pandemic, but we have gone from 190 to 117. We have not replaced secretaries as they have retired. So we are a far more lean group of professionals than we have been in the past. I have personally been through this process with our folks. It has been very difficult. Our teachers have sacrificed. They have taken on larger class sizes. They have worked very hard, and they have watched their colleagues not being replaced. So there has been some very important fiscal responsibility with personnel.
Are there other members of the public? Mr. Higgins?
Thank you, Dr. McCary. It's part of the decision when I was on the board to go from 8 periods to 9 at the high school. Here was the rationale that was presented. The rationale was we didn't want to lose any of our best students, academic best students, to Pope John. And we wanted to keep them here because it was enough that we didn't have enough kids coming in, but we didn't want to lose the better ones. So those same students were mostly in the music program. Academically and the music went together, and they were some of our top producers. And so they were found that they skipped lunch to go to the music room to practice. They skipped study hall to go to the music room to practice. Sometimes they walked out of their AP classes to go to the music room to practice. And they could do all that. So the idea was, let's do something for these students. Let's make sure that they eat lunch. This was the driving thing. I can't believe it. So we went from 8 periods to 9, but we didn't tell the teachers they had to go from 5 teaching periods to 6. So you had that extra period for a teacher. And then it was discovered that we were going to need some of the extra classes, and the most senior teachers at the highest salary were the ones chosen first if there was an extra class needed. So we didn't know the number. And the number then came up, there was $330,000 presented a month later as the cost to fill these extra classes. English as a second language, an extra math class, whatever. And then I said, this can't be. We just voted, and now we got an extra $330,000 cost. Well, that cost went down to $220 when some of the classes were pared down, but it was still $220 more than we had. Now, the middle school has the same thing. And you can see on your agenda, all the 6-period classes that are approved at extra money. That was one thing that caused a tremendous increase in our costs. Number two, the most telling cost-cutting measure ever that I've seen in this state was Governor Christie and Sweeney, the Democrat Senate president, agreed to have the teachers pay for part of their health care. They paid 1.5% of a Cadillac plan up until then. And it was phased in over 4 years that those making $100,000 or more would pay 35% of their health care costs. Those making less than 100, it was phased down 15 to 35%. The teachers were furious over this. So it was a 4-year mandatory phase-in. This board, on the negotiating committee that I was a member of, and I was the only one to vote against it, was to start 2 years ago, giving the teachers a rebate on the amount of money that the state made them pay. And the reason it was done at the state level was because they knew the local boards didn't have the backbone to do it. So instead of just keeping it as the state dictated, we're now giving 1.5% a year rebate back on the healthcare costs. That's got to be changed in the next negotiating committee. That and the 6th period are the two biggest cost problems they have. The third thing, all the aides are in the union. There's no need for that. Part-time aides, just like a part-time worker over at Acme, here they're earning a pension just because they're in the union. To me, it's not right. So something has to be done to get the aides out of the union. That they're not members of the teachers union. And lastly, another thing you can look at, you have two excess funds, you might say. The capital reserve fund that we spoke about that's going to grow to $5.7 million. But you have a working fund as well. It's your excess fund, it's your slush fund you need for emergencies. When I was on the board, that fund, and you'll see it in your budget, averaged about $1.3 million. If a boiler blew up or a wall fell down, you needed money. So I petitioned and I got some support, and we actually approved taking that fund from 1.3 million to 750,000 one year. And everybody said, what if we have a catastrophe? Well, we didn't, and we had capital reserve fund if we needed it. And that money was given back to the taxpayers. And we didn't need it. We didn't use it. But now I can guarantee that fund is back up to 1.3 million. So it's another $500,000 you can look for. So those are some of the things. And lastly, when a taxpayer is told that they have a 3.03% increase in taxes, compounded with the town, compounded with the county, at a average per house value of $211,000, it's really more than that, because there are a number of people who don't pay tax increases. They're either on disability, they're veterans, there's a reason, legitimate reason, and that's lumped into those that are eligible. So when you say 3.03, look at your tax bill. It's gone up over $400 every year for the last 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public who are in attendance in person?
Hi, Vicki Smith. I am a high school English teacher. I live in the Lake Walkill section of Vernon. I'm also the VTEA president. I want to clarify some facts as far as negotiations are concerned. Our negotiations actually saved this district over $600,000 because we went to a state plan. We also have negotiated that the 6th class has been scaled down from 20%, and will scale down a percentage for the next 3 years. I just want to make sure those facts are clear. And so the burden of finances aren't put once again because of those darn teachers or those darn educators. And I just want to make sure that those facts are clear. Thank you.
Just to add to what Mrs. Smith is saying, during the negotiations with the NJEA, the sixth period has gone from 20% and will go down to 11% in the final year of the contract. So thank you, Ms. Smith.
How many years?
3 years.
Thank you. Any other members of the public? Do we have any members of the public who are attending via Zoom who would like to make a public comment? If so, please raise your hand at this time and you'll be admitted into the meeting. I can't see that screen too well. Do we have anybody who's? We don't, okay. All right, so then we'll close it to the public at this time. Item J is open board member forum.
Yeah, I have something. So when I took on the liaison chair role, there hadn't been a meeting in some time, so I asked for some advice from my board members about what would be important to talk about. And one of the things that was brought up was the letter that Mr. Nunziata referred to earlier about the dog park and the transferring of ownership of it. So I'd like to talk to I'd like the board to talk about that a little bit. Mrs. Mitchell referred to some conversations she's had, and various people seemed to have had conversations with the public. So I'd like to get a sense of what does the board want now with that issue, because the letter did go out before I joined the board, and there seemed to be some interest in transferring ownership of that land. So now we have new board members, so let's hash it out a little.
I think that it's a good thing that we should be talking about to make sure that the board has consensus on the direction that we're going in.
Right.
The board did express interest over the last couple of months in transferring ownership in a more permanent situation to the township, because we have been continuously leasing the land to the township for years now. My opinion is that we are a school district. Our job is to educate children, not to be landlords and not to own assets that we don't need to own. I think that community garden and dog park are wonderful, wonderful assets to the township. And I would have liked to have seen the township take on that property in a more permanent fashion, because they have been operating that land for more than 5 years now. We have received crickets, really, from the township in regards to the letter that was sent.
We actually received a hard no.
Okay, and perhaps in your liaison committee, it was a hard no.
Yeah.
I personally don't understand why. And it's not selling it for $1. It's moving it from one taxpayer bucket to another, which is a net zero. And, it's the town covers town property. I mean, the Board of Education.
Townships run parks.
Right.
School districts educate kids.
Exactly. And we're not
And
in the real estate business.
Can I add something? I wouldn't see giving away any assets. I mean, I understand the building, costs money to run, but even before I was on the board, selling the building, Vernon's school population can grow very fast. I mean, when my daughter was in school, there were 14 classrooms here. And I understand the trend has been way down. And that catastrophic event with the mortgage crisis, when a lot of people left or couldn't sell their homes. But we've just had another catastrophic event that have brought people into town. I mean, anybody who you talk to says the town is swelling up with people. There's very few houses to sell. So we could get an influx of kids. The dog park. Oh, sorry.
And can you just keep your
Yeah, I get it all. The dog park, is just a field now. But I forget when Mr. Higgins was on the board, but I'm sure a board in 2004 or 5, when Vernon was exploding, would never think 15 years later we'd be plummeting. So an asset that doesn't really cost us money. I understand you're a landlord, but it's not like we're a landlord going down there and spending money. I don't think it costs us anything to have. So, and, the cost to split it up and, we got solar panels there. Maybe we want to expand that program. I don't know, but I would not be against giving any assets. Giving it to the town does not accomplish anything, really, to be honest with you, because they could also sell it for something we don't want, because we'd lose control of it. So I would not be in selling any assets, to be honest with you.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that to some extent that makes sense, but it's not a super use. I think one thing that we haven't really talked about is the actual property and the fact that there's a lot of pressure from the public to sell it as if it's some valuable thing that we're, holding on to, but it's a kind of irregularly shaped property that would need to be subdivided, is my understanding. I don't know that it's got a lot of value or use capability, and it just seemed to make sense because it's being used by a lot of residents happily in a town-type capacity, rather than disturb that. It made sense for the town, I thought when I saw the letter, it made sense for the town to take over that property. I don't know that it's necessary, but it did seem to make
The school district has
logistical
always been
sense.
involved in the town.
Sorry?
Activities. All the sports teams use school property, the dog park. So we give a lot to the town. So it sort of fits into what we do passively other ways. And it is the one asset that they're not making any more of. So you have an asset that doesn't cost you money, just sitting there. We got a relatively low-key tenant, and you can't get any more of it.
Well, it's kind of a moot point since they don't want it anyway. So it's kind of a moot point. I guess the real question, though, is we get pressure from some of the people came here tonight, actually, to sell it. And is that something the board? I personally I'm not in favor of that. I think it's being used by the community. I don't think it's got a lot of value to sell. That's not something I'm personally in favor of. But I have a committee meeting coming up, and with the liaison committee, and if this is something we're going to explore at all, we should know where the board stands. What do other people think? I mean, is selling it something that we would really actually even consider?
I think last time, my previous venture on the board, I think Ms. Mitchell was there, Ms. Anzanato, I think Mr. Sweeney, you were there too. We did try very hard to, say to the town, like, this would be great for you. We want to work with you on this, and we've gotten a hard no. And the discussion about selling it was not only putting the cost into it, but we can't decide who to sell it to, right? We can't say, oh, that's awesome, you're going to do this with this land, and someone could put up condos, like, that's not what we want for this town. And that was the discussion at the time a couple of years ago. I think that the perception, like you're saying, from the public is that we're having a budget crisis.
Right. and
We're
we should-
sitting on
yes.
this land, right? It is an absolute asset to the town. Maybe we can make some money off of it to help the budget crisis, but I don't think that that's the case. And if that's not the case, then we should not be selling it.
And I know, Ms. Mitchell, you mentioned that you had some conversations. What are your thoughts?
Well, when I see misinformation on social media, it makes me a little crazy. So, I try to rectify that, but whoever decides to put out misinformation, there's nothing I can do. I do feel that cost-wise, the engineering that would go into it, subdividing that goes into it, it just, with an unknown of what we would get for it, I don't know that I would do that at this time. I think that if we were going to focus on real estate as a board, we really should focus on Walnut Ridge more than a piece of land, So I would just kind of say, let's leave it as it is. We have the lease.
If
We're
the
gonna do
town is
year
not
to year.
interested in it, then I'm not interested in letting it go.
I just, and if something catastrophic happened where all of a sudden we needed to get some money, then maybe we would look at subdividing it and selling it. But I think at this juncture, I just don't think that I would spend a lot of energy on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I needed to hear.
Does that seem to be what the rest of the board is thinking?
I agree.
I'm not looking to sell it.
Yeah, no.
It's ours.
Okay.
Then
It
let's
stays
do-
as is. Excellent. All right, thank you, everybody.
Ms. Coughlin, did you want to say something, or you're good?
Sure, I'll just add, thank you for asking. And again, full disclosure, I always say this, I utilize the dog park on a regular basis, so I don't want anyone to think I'm biased. But while I'm not privy to the dog park's finances, I do know, and I've mentioned this in the past, they are fully self-sufficient. So they are not costing the town anything. As I mentioned, I don't know much about the garden, which is right next to it, but the dog park, I do know has put over the years forth a great amount of money, everything from the parking lot to the fence. There's volunteers who do a great deal of stuff there. They do fundraisers. So they're not costing us anything. Again, I can't speak to the garden, but, and again, that I do visit the dog park on a regular basis. Honestly, it's really, truly a wonderful thing to have. I can't tell you how many people will come over from Warwick and they rave about how nice it is. They really enjoy meeting people in town. Um, and they're always talking about what an incredible dog park that we have and how lucky our town is to have places like this. Um, so I agree when Ray was talking about that we own it. I agree with what he said. So, but thank you for asking.
Thank you. I just want to circle back to something that was brought up by Dr. McKay earlier. You know, I think that many of the comments brought forward tonight, you know, I appreciate a lot of the input, and I think it's valuable to hear from different perspectives and different members in the community. But I do have difficulty with the assertion that that nothing's being done. You know, when in 3 years you reduce from 341 full-time certificated staff members, 341 in September of 2018 to today having 290 3 years later, to go down by more than 12% over a 3-year period is a significant reduction. That's 50 less full-time certificated staffs that are in our schools today working on our payroll than were 3 years ago. You know, these reductions have been phased in over the last 3 years and have been done in order to preserve programs for students. And strategically, we've had, for 50 cuts, there's been probably twice as many transfers of faculty between buildings in order to make sure that we have the right people in the right places to have appropriate class sizes. You know, I think a lot is being done to try to take the brunt of the state funding cuts, but maintain the quality of our schools for the kids. So I just want to highlight that point. I think it's a really important point to drive home for our community, so that you know, the perception isn't that we're doing nothing, because we are working hard to preserve the quality of our school, but manage the financial crisis that we find ourselves in.
And I just want to add kudos to our staff. Our teaching staff has taken the brunt of this, whether it's the transfers or whether it's the increased enrollment in their classes, and our staff has done an amazing job. So credit to our teachers. You do not lose 12% of your faculty without everybody else sacrificing. And to that point, this week, I want to thank our staff for everything that they've done as we've gone through our Spring Forward plan. This is not easy in a pandemic. So our staff has done an amazing job. And with these cuts, these are significant cuts. Everybody always thinks that there's a lot of, like, if you will, fat in a budget. That's not the case when you're talking about personnel, especially in the field of teaching.
You know, and I know you're dealing with a smaller pool when you have administrators. So you're not going to have those large numbers. You're not going to have 50 cuts in administrative positions. But we have made economies in those areas as well to make our administrative team much more efficient. We used to have an individual administrator for every content area: history, you know, humanities, language arts, social sciences, math. Now we've combined those. So science and math has one administrator. Language art, ELA, and humanities has one administrator. You know, so these cuts have been made, and they've been soft cuts in the way that we've preserved the vast majority of our programs because of the transfers that have been done. So there hasn't been an uproar in the community about many of these cuts, but they have been going on. If you look at our personnel reports every month, you could see the trend is going in the appropriate direction in order to meet the needs of the financial crisis that we're in. So I thank you for highlighting that, Dr. McKay.
Mr. Annunziata, if I could say too, one of the things, I mean, I'd like to commend the administration because the board had numerous times and Special Services Committee had looked at the administrative structure there, and the central office administration listened to us and, was proactive and put different measures in place. So that was definitely something that was very good and much appreciated.
Thank you. Anything else for open board member forum? Okay, just a reminder that we will have a additional board meeting next Thursday at 7 p.m. Walnut Ridge. That advertisement or posting should go out to the community tomorrow. So that way we are in compliance. All right.
Was this something we wanted to mention something about? I don't know what,
Well,
this is in the package.
Yeah.
It says attachment A, but I don't know that I saw a reference to it.
There's some terrific artists in our school, and two of them did a poster for vaccinating for the flu. And the posters won the competition for vaccinating for the flu. So the Department of Health wanted to honor them. So we gave you a picture of the two different ones. In a podcast a couple of weeks ago, I have a cute picture of the kids sitting with their posters. So that's what you have in front of you.
Okay. Thank you. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. O'Donnell, second.
Second.
Ms. Lutner, all in favor?